Perfect. Thank you so much, Natalie. Good afternoon slash good evening, everyone, and welcome to the OISE Alumni Career Panel on Finding Your Path in Education. My name is Jemmelia Morgan. I am a registered social worker and I'm also a OISE alumni, and so I'll be your moderator for today's event. And so you can go to the next slide for us, Neil. We invite you to just, in the chat, you can indicate where you're from, as well as what area of career or field of education you are currently in or aspiring to be in the future. Today, we are joined by three distinguished alumni from OISE who will share their unique stories and experiences in education. And they will reflect on how they've integrated their passion, their skills, their training, their interests, as well as their career paths and valuable information, and just in terms of some key lessons that they've learned along the way. And so you can go to the next slide, Neil. Our hope is that our stories will highlight the ways in which you can further explore your own careers and discover your opportunities for career growth, diversification, professional advancement. And while we have some insightful questions, we're also inviting you to encouraging you to participate by putting your questions in the chat box below. You can go to the next slide for me, Neil, please. Before we begin, we'd like to start with the land acknowledgement for the land which the University of Toronto operates. This land has been a site of human activity for over 15,000 years and is traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful for the opportunity to work on this land. Next slide for me, please, Neil. Thank you. So again, we encourage you to join in on the conversation. If you're not currently following us on LinkedIn, please do so. We're at OISE U of T, and we're also on Instagram. Please engage with us there. You can find us at, again, the same hashtag, which is OISE UFT. Next slide for us, please, Neil. Thank you so much. All right, so let's introduce our panelists for today. We have Chohan, who's an Associate Director of Student Life. For over a decade, he has experience with the University of Toronto in student affairs. He has expertise in fostering and promoting student engagement at all levels of higher education. Welcome and thank you for joining us today, Aman. We also have Jamie Phillips, who is a Master's of Education, has a master's in education, and she is also an elementary teacher at Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board. She has been an educator for over 13 years and also has her training as a registered early childhood educator. She is fascinated by science and behind early childhood development. Welcome and thank you for joining us, Jamie. And lastly, but definitely not the least, we have Vince with us today. He's a product strategy and artificial intelligence expert, and he has led instructional design teams in higher education in corporate settings. And today, Vince works on artificial intelligence and learning. Panelists. Okay, Neil, if you can go to the next slide for me, please. Thank you so, so much. A little bit about myself. Again, I'm an OISE alumni who completed their solution-focused brief therapy certificate here at the lovely OISE, at Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. I currently work at SickKids at Center for Community Mental Health as a child and family therapist, and I'm involved in some consulting work with organizations you may know of, such as Big Brothers Big Sisters of Toronto and Juliet's Place, Microsoft Canada. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. We're going to go ahead and get right into the thick of things and start with our panel discussion. I see some individuals who are interacting with us in the chat. It's really nice to meet some of you. Phasia, Sabir, thank you for joining us today. I see there's Human, thank you for joining us today, and Sophia, who's also working in the area of education. So really nice to see those of us who are joining us and from your respective careers. And again, continue to engage with us. If you have questions along the way, throw them in the chat. I will be sure to continue to check them. So if there are questions for Vince, Aman, Natalie, or so sorry, not Natalie. You may have questions for Natalie. Jamie or myself, please feel free to write them in the chat throughout the presentation. We'll also have some Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, our first question for today. The question is, we're looking for advice around current and aspiring research scholars. So for those passionate about research, there are many career paths beyond academia. What are some lesser known careers or work opportunities in the field of research that you would feel so sorry, something just popped in front of my screen. What are some lesser known career or work opportunities in the field of research that would encourage others to explore? And how can individuals leverage their research skills in these roles? I'm wondering if Jamie can start us off.
So for me, as a classroom teacher, there is research involved. We do collect data. It's called assessments with students. So my perspective is just, it's we do research as teachers, but it's just a little different. However, if you want to get into looking at the broader picture in terms of education and do research for, say, the Ontario Ministry of Education, to see how students are doing in different parts of the province or the country or whatever, that's a little different. And I won't speak too much about that because I'm just not familiar with it. But I feel that any field where you are dealing with populations of people, it's important to know who you're working with. So I'll say that.
Okay, so it's really important for us to
Hmm.
engage and know the individuals that we're
Yeah.
working with, and probably very likely the population as well. Awesome. Thank you for your insights there. Uh, let's go on to our next question. Next slide, please. So sorry. Oh, thank you, Neil. Okay, I think this question is for Vince. Or an Amandeep. When we're thinking about transition into practical roles, what motivated you to transition from traditional classroom roles to more of a hands-on experiential positions in education? And can you provide any examples of how your skills and your values guided you with this transition?
Uh, yeah, sure. I've always been I've always been passionate about teaching, but I was never passionate about teaching in the traditional sense and kind of in front of a classroom and in that area. And so for me, it was very important to find ways that I could create space and create opportunities for those who like to be in that type of area. So someone from my field, I have coordinators, I have students training students, all these different types of pieces and programs and workshops that we put together because it's, from my perspective, it's very important to have those pieces there. And so for me, what I really value or what I really kind of push other educators to think about is this idea of trying to get yourself into space where you can hold some power, where you're able to really engage and make sure, not so much engage, but kind of steer the boat, right? You're going to have to do your own, you're going to have to be the coordinator, you're going to have to do some of the grunt work, that type of piece, but really aiming to see where can I take this passion for learning or sorry, this passion for teaching and then start making the decisions, right? And start creating the space and creating, giving other individuals opportunities who love to be in front of the classroom, that space there. And so that was really my focus. And what motivated me was just I saw the individuals in my journey when I went to high school, university, in my master's program, and I was just like, that's what I want to do. I want to be the one to create space. And if that's you as an educator that, you do love to teach, but you want to create that, I would highly encourage you to find space where you are in control of that and can provide that opportunity to others.
Can I add on to that? Because you just got me thinking. Um, so the great thing about a noisy education is you can take your diploma, degree, whatever it may be, and it's transferable in a lot of ways. And as a classroom teacher, I would say it can look very different as a classroom teacher as well. For example, the roles within a school board, yes, you can be a classroom teacher, but for instance, next year I'm moving out of the classroom and doing more work with the school board around Indigenous education and equity. So I
Hmm.
think it's just important to maybe keep your options open. And yes, there's different kinds of leadership. Yes, you could be a classroom teacher. That's one form of leadership, but uh, think of other ways that you can use your degree and that's related to education that's not necessarily being a classroom teacher, even though there's nothing wrong with that, but just to kind of piggyback on what was said.
Hmm. I think
Yeah.
you're raising some really good points about how we can think outside of the box, right? And, it's not just thinking linearly, but thinking from Amon's perspective around your passions and really honing that in, creating lanes for yourself. And as Jamie said, don't be afraid to diversify. Don't see yourself only in one lane, but really look for areas where you're going to carve out a niche for yourself. And I always think that rooms of opportunity will open for you, especially as you get to know and grow your strengths a little bit more. Any other
Yeah,
perspectives or thoughts from our panelists?
yeah, I'd add on a couple of things here. I made the jump out from OISE in 2017 into the tech world. So, as you think about transitioning outside of the classroom, if you want to pivot into kind of the private sector, I started in a very simple kind of foot in the door role, teaching instructors how to use software effectively to teach. It was an
Mhm.
education technology platform. And what's kind of cool about the skills you develop at OISE is that they're half of the puzzle in a lot of ways. In the context of K to 12, they're more than half of the puzzle, but at the same time, you're learning things like teaching, teamwork, coordination, management strategies. And from that first role teaching instructors how to use ed tech effectively, I got to work with product teams, I got to work with marketing teams, I got to work with sales teams. And I started to pick up what I'd call the other half of my skill set. There's the education stuff, and then there's the business stuff since I work in private sector. And so with that transition, you bring a huge amount of skills with you, but you also have the
Mhm.
opportunity then to apply education to something of interest. For me, it was always technology as a digital native growing up alongside the internet. It was quite natural for me to look at technology and see how can education smash together into this to create opportunities to learn and grow. And you see tons of things, even on the research question just a minute ago. I work with user researchers. They need to have research methodologies and understand how to conduct research, but they also need to then know the software side of things as well. And so, outside of the more traditional education space, if you think private sector, if you think about working in a corporate space, education is about half of the skills you'll need. But then as you enter into those spaces, you'll learn more about um, the for-profit world and things like setting targets and how do you build towards
Mhm.
goals and drive business and things like that.
I love how you're talking about, again, seeing a theme around diversification, really knowing not only your strengths, but knowing how the different fields in which we can engage with work, right? There's public and private sector. And I also
Yeah.
think about things like promoting those skills, not just our core skills, but the soft skills that we have. You know, even for example, each of these individuals have a profile on LinkedIn. And I noticed how they're able to really promote some of those skills. And sometimes job opportunities come to you that way, right? And being able to see other lanes for you to then kind of interact with. You'd be surprised how much times individuals reach out for collaboration opportunities. And it's really just about, again, knowing how to sell your skill set and also being able to understand the industry within which you're working. I'm going to go
And
on to
oh,
another question just for the brevity of time that we have. So I'm hoping that if there are some additional thoughts, we'll be able to still get them at the end. I do see a few questions in the chat, which I will get to. Thank you, Alexandra and Ambika, for your questions. I will get to them momentarily. Okay, question number three. I believe this is for Vince. So you're going to start us off and just around career growth and strategies. Can you share with us specific strategies that you've used to make both horizontal and vertical career moves within the field of post-secondary education? And how did these strategies help you in leveraging your skills and expanding your professional network?
Yeah, so I would say if you're making a pivot, and I've made a couple in my career, happy with all of them, but patience is really key.
Mhm.
It feels personal sometimes to feel like you're going sideways or backwards or taking a step back. But I think one of the things to remember is that you know, it might take you 5 years to get a little bit further, but you're going to be 5 years older anyways. Transitions open up a lot of doors when you make a pivot from, if you're in a classroom and you want to pivot into private sector, for example, there's a lot of opportunities there. The salary structure is different, the amount of work-life balance is different. Um, and so it might feel like a half step back to make a pivot in a different direction. But really, what you're
Mhm.
doing is you're giving yourself a greater ceiling in a lot of cases if you make a jump like that. Other things really practically, never burn bridges, always default to positive intent when dealing with others. Like everything you do is a team game. In K to 12, you're often a little bit more alone than you are outside of the classroom. And so learning how to build and form strong relationships and build trust is equally as important as the skills that you have. So um, never burn bridges, build strong relationships, and don't feel rushed if you need to take a half step backwards to go further in the long scheme.
Awesome. Thank you for that advice, especially around, again, maintaining connections with individuals that you work with, right? Sometimes it's, again, I think about the 5 degrees of separation, right? And that there are individuals who sometimes know individuals who know you. So ensuring that you don't burn those bridges are very key. Maybe to pick a back off of that, I do see one question here. It says, does anyone have advice about strategies specifically around pivoting out of the classroom and into other worlds? So for example, I think you mentioned around moving into the private sector. Is there anything else that you would give as a word of advice in terms of those who are looking to make that transition?
I can,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
I'll finish
We'll
up
go to
quick.
Vincent, then we'll go to Jamie.
Yeah, two things that pop into mind is if you're going to make a pivot in a direction you like and care about. For me, it was ed tech because I quite like technology. I like optimizing and tweaking, and so I had a natural kind of interest and passion in that already. And so making the jump over was easy because I was motivated to because I cared about the space I was moving into. And then the second thing I would say is to simply oh goodness, it slipped out of my mind. Oh yeah, know where to aim. A lot of folks who reach out to me about like pivoting into tech see a big company like maybe desire to learn as localish to Toronto, but they're also really, really mature as an organization. So they're trying to hire from hiring pools of folks who have been out of industry for maybe 10 years. Though there might be a startup that's kind of newer and is only developing as a company there, that's a really good place to pivot into. Jumping into something like a Facebook or an Amazon or something like that will never happen when you're making a transition. So look for something that's small just to kind of wet your feet, see if it's actually something you're interested in, but set realistic
Mhm.
goals about, what kind of organization you can jump to successfully if you're just starting.
I like to call them boutique agencies, and
Yeah.
sometimes they have a little bit more of, again, you know, uh, when you're going into larger scales, again, a very corporate approach has a very sometimes strong workplace culture, and
Yeah.
sometimes smaller organizations again are looking for fresh blood, and they're open to more nuances of skill development, and having a more tight-knit team. So those can be the advantages of moving into smaller organizations that are in the corporate setting. Thanks, Vince. Jamie, I think you said that you were mentioning you had some perspective to add. Go ahead.
Yes. So the great thing about this panel is we're all OISE alum, but we kind of took different paths with our degrees. So as I mentioned, classroom teacher now. However, I think it's important to, if you are looking to network and expand and grow, it's a little harder to do, at working at a school or school board level. So what I found very helpful, LinkedIn and Instagram, because even as a classroom teacher, I do have what I like to call side gigs. So, most recently, I'm teaching at Niagara University, teaching a course in their faculty of ed, or I'm doing workshops for my school board, or reading for the love of it for educators out there. I presented as at that this year. So it's reaching out to people, it's making yourself visible, and it's just sharing what you do. So on LinkedIn, I have my credentials there, what I'm doing. I don't post on there a lot. I could probably do a lot more, but I just share things that I'm doing. And that's how I picked up the job at Niagara University. I do have a teachergram account for the teachers out there. You would know what that is.
Love
And so I
that.
just share what I'm doing in my classroom or at my board level, and you connect with people. And the more you connect with people, your professional bubble gets bigger and bigger. And so two
Mhm.
things happen. You're either learning from people and getting to know people in different areas of education, or you are kind of selling yourself and promoting who you are and what you do in your skill set. And I think that is so important. We didn't really get into networking, but just building your base, whether it's your school board, whether it's the school that you're in, whether it's I don't know, your teachergram account, like people that you know there. It's just important to reach out because as a classroom teacher, you're not just a classroom teacher. You have transferable skills. And if you want to go to the private sector, go for it by all means. But if you still like working in the public sector education, there are so many options. If you're just not bound to the classroom.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's such an important tool around networking and, being able to create those relationships because oftentimes they can be referrals to job opportunities that you didn't even apply for. They may be able to let you know, especially if you're, letting them know that you're open to work and new opportunities. Sometimes those networking opportunities can, again, really open new doors for you. So thank you for that. I see a few questions in the chat. Again, we will be sure to get to them. Please continue to add them either to the chat. We'd prefer if you could use the Q&A function that's just at the bottom of the Zoom screen. That way I don't lose track of any of those. One really quick question for Vince. You had mentioned a company that there was a company that you mentioned earlier, and someone's just asking if you could repeat that.
Yeah, I followed up in chat. It was Desire to Learn I had mentioned. They're just a bit more big
Okay,
and
perfect.
mature. They probably aren't taking anybody transitioning for the first time.
Perfect. Thanks so much. We'll go ahead and go on to the next question. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, we're going to have Aman start us off. We're talking about pivoting to hands-on experiences outside the classroom. So, Aman, can you tell us how have you integrated your personality, your personal identity, skills, and interests into hands-on educational roles outside of the classroom? And can you share a story, if possible, about a project or a role where this integration was particularly impactful and successful?
Yeah, sure. My personal identity is I bring my personal identity everywhere, right? I don't shy from who I am and where I'm from and uh the things that make me who I am, because that in itself creates a identity or a value add to my unit. It adds a value add to everything that I do. And so for me, it's very important where I have the opportunity to share with individuals, for example, just to kind of show up and share my story, right? I'm a second generation Canadian. My parents are immigrants, both from India. I've lived here for 30 some odd years, and I constantly share those stories and I constantly share my aspirations and the things that I want to kind of achieve out of the education system that I was a part of, the work that I do. And so, in one particular, in terms of a story or a project role where integration was particularly impactful, is I run a um, a workshop where it's a train the trainer type of piece. And it's really about being authentic and bringing your authentic self to work. Is about being authentic with the individuals that you are working with, whether they're students, whether they're staff members, it doesn't really matter. And the reason why I share a particular story, a part of my land acknowledgement is really sharing, what I've taken from the land as a son of immigrants and what this land has given me and what I need to kind of give back to that. It's a part of my identity, and to share that I want to be vulnerable, and by being vulnerable, I can gain trust, and that trust will allow you to then share more things with me or learn from me, where you may have just kind of been like, okay, I'm really not, thinking about this person or, going to listen to this person overall. And I think authenticity when it comes to whether it's job applications or authenticity when it comes to networking or trying to find that is really, really important. So you need to kind of think about yourself and what it makes, who you are, what makes you you, and bring that to work. If I need to call out someone because I think something was a little bit, with a microaggression, that's something I'm going to do. Or if I'm going to call out something or in a structure or a framework that we're building at work with directors, and I call it, well, what about these students? Or we're not thinking about this group. That forces them every time they bring something to me to think of that because they're going to be like, I'm just going to call it out. Right. And so it's just important to think about those things that are very valuable to you and what makes you
Mhm.
you. And so authenticity is my piece here is that always bring your most authentic self to work. People will follow you when they know that it's just who you are.
Hmm. I like that perspective because I think, again, it makes me think of pieces around workplace culture and values. And sometimes our own personal culture and value system can align with the overarching strategic plan or the goals that they have for the future, especially in the world where we're living, where there's DEI culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not being afraid to be our authentic self and seeing how that shows up and aligns with the organization that you work with is so key, not only for your potential employer, but for yourself to make sure it's a great fit. So thank you for sharing that. Um, we're going to go on to the next question, question number 5. And Vince, we're going to have you lead us off. So here we're going to be talking a little bit about navigating nonlinear paths. So many educators face nonlinear career paths. Can you discuss a time when you made a significant lateral move in your career and how it contributed to your professional development and future opportunities?
Yeah, so for this one, I would be thinking about that first jump out of the classroom space. So that was 2017. There's a company called Top Hat in downtown Toronto. They make classroom response software. A lot of higher ed instructors are using it. And the job I took there was, I think that title was client training specialist. So really kind of boring title. Don't get fixated on titles is my first bit of advice. What was really good about that is because, again, I jumped into something where education was half of the picture, the technology was the other half. I excelled really quickly. I worked with instructors who wanted to teach more effectively with technology. And when I hopped on those calls with them, I already knew about teaching. And so very, very quickly, I did well, which incentivized my leadership to figure out in some ways how to scale me. So I got to take on bigger and more exciting projects, and I got to work more cross-functionally with some of the other teams. Always be wildly curious when you're traveling nonlinear paths. You don't know what you don't know, and you never know that working with somebody in a different department might introduce you to an area of the business that you're actually kind of interested in learning more. And then you build trust with those people. You take on small challenges together, which then leads you to take on bigger challenges. And before you know it, you might be leading a really, really fancy project with a lot of stakeholders. So I like to think at this stage of my career, 7 years out of OISE or so, about just, I've got a briefcase with a bunch of skills I keep throwing into it. The more curious I am, the more opportunities I have to work on something I maybe have done a little bit of, but I can now get a little bit better at it, which then leads me to the other thing I'm curious about. And so my little briefcase of skills, I've got all sorts of weird things, but that's kind of the fun thing about a nonlinear path. You don't know what you're going to find around the corner. And so having flexibility in your skill set is really, really key. So be curious, uh, do what you do as best as you can, and build trust with the people you work with.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And a lot of really good nuggets there, especially around being a curious learner, a curious colleague who's working with others and willing to collaborate across teams. That cross-team collaboration can, again, expose you to new learning opportunities, bring out new passions and skills, and help you to put new tools in your skill set and into your own tool belt that you're able to speak to later, especially if you're looking at, again, whether it's making a lateral move or a vertical move later on in your career. I'm wondering if Aman or Jamie would like to add anything. No pressure if you don't. But yeah, just leaving room if you wanted to add
I'll
something.
I'll add to that. Because again, classroom teacher, but my career path was nonlinear as well. For a lot of educators that I know, not everyone, it's you do the undergraduate degree, you go to teacher college to become a teacher. It was never like that for me. I worked as an ECE before I became a teacher. And at that point, I already had the undergraduate degree, which is now it's becoming more common. There are programs for ECs to get the undergraduate degree with their diploma, but at that time it wasn't. And so I was an ECE, then I became an EA with my school board. And while I was an EA with my school board, I did my master's at OISE. And again, unusual because usually that comes after the teacher's college and everything else. And then then after my master's, I applied to teacher's college. I was still an EA and then I became a teacher. And so that is just like the formal education part, a little mixed in with some of the professional positions that I've had. Now, as a classroom teacher, I'm still transitioning. I still am doing other things. I still have no idea where my career is taking me. The one thing I do know is that I'm following things that I'm passionate about, and that's so important.
Hmm.
Because I'm the one who has to get up every morning and do it. So I'm not doing it for I don't know, money or whatever else it may be. Although those things are important, but I enjoy what I'm doing and I get excited about the next step. So it's just something to think about. Again, there are being a an educator, a teacher, there's so many different pathways you can take. So just be open to that and just remember what you love.
Hmm. Hmm. Being open to new opportunities, and sometimes they may be lateral before they're vertical. And I think as you build up some of the skill set laterally, then you're able to sometimes make a vertical jump and sometimes leaps, right? Especially while you're continuing your education process. So taking those certificate programs sometimes that are available through OISE, right? For me, it really did. It opened the door for me to see that I wanted to get into my master's program because I realized I had reached sort of like a block in my career and I wasn't really able to take it to the next level. Taking the solution focused certificate program really helped me to hone in on some skills that I needed in terms of crisis management, working with children and youth in the community. And I was able to see, okay, I want to take this thing further. And once I did, all these doors started to open vertically. So yeah, I think that lends to a little bit about what you're saying, focusing on your passion. And then don't worry if you're making lateral movements per se. Focus on the passion, allow that to take you to where you need to go. Right. And the doors for opportunity and money will open. Right. Oftentimes when you're again following that area of passion and honing in on that. So thanks for that. We're actually going to be starting with you next, Jamie, so stay right with us. Please do not worry if your questions are in the chat. We're about to go into our open Q&A segment, but we're going to finish off some of our more formal questions, and we're going to start with Jamie. So sorry, we're going to go back to the next slide for us. To the next slide, please. Thank you so much. All right. So, Jamie, we're wondering just around research practice and integration into career roles. In your experience, have you integrated research-based methods into your educational practice, whether in teaching or another role? Oh, you're muted, Jamie.
There we go. I would say definitely. The thing about being an educator, it's your duty to stay on top of research and research based on practices for education. So I'm always, and again, because I'm really into science and the science of early childhood education, I'm always thinking about child development. And so right now, there is a focus on the science of reading, for example. Um, we know that students are falling behind in terms of literacy. And so we're trying to catch them earlier in their learning, their formal learning years, to ensure that we're supporting them later on in terms of literacy. So what the science of reading basically focuses on is that students need explicit instruction on phonemic awareness that will lead to reading. So as a kindergarten teacher, I have changed how I teach phonics and phonemic awareness and letter sounds and writing and reading in general. So we have explicit instructions about the sounds of letters, and we build up on that through the year. And right now, at the end of the year, I have quite a few kids reading. So again, I can't emphasize enough if you're an educator working in a classroom or not, or even outside, keep up on the research and that's happening in your field that is focused on the students that you are leading.
Mm-hmm. Really focus on the students that you're leading and, allowing them to be the, again, your area of focus when it comes to, your teaching and where you're focusing your efforts. Thank you for that. Um, any additional advice from Vince or Ramon, if you have any experience? I'm not sure if you have any experience in the area of research, if there's anything you'd like to contribute to what Jamie's just said.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is like, especially in the corporate space that gets a little bit pulled away from higher ed and from academia, you scrutinize the research. In my line of work, I see a lot of kind of learning myths that get propagated quite a bit in the L&D learning and development corporate space. A lot of people are trying to be loud on LinkedIn and post stuff, and oftentimes it's not quite validated with the rigor that we would expect at OISE. So just keep a keen eye on who's saying what and why.
Mm-hmm. Very, very true. Thank you for sharing that. And really keeping our eyes open is super key and important as well. Thank you again. I think we are really opening the conversation up, and I'm seeing a lot of insightful questions being asked in our Q&A portion. So we're actually going to go ahead to that next. While I do have some questions that I'd like to ask myself. I'm going to pause here and see if we can answer some of the questions from our audience today. Next slide for us, please. We're going to jump down to slide 20 if possible, and we'll come back up to those. Thank you so much. Okay, in the meantime, please continue to add your questions to our Q&A. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen where their toolbar is, you'll see a raise hand function, share, and right to the right, you'll see Q&A. If you have any extra questions for us, feel free to add them to our question and answer chat, and I'll be sure to answer those for you along with our lovely panelists. Okay, so our first question comes from Aisha. She's asking, what about the switch? So we talked a little bit about the switch from higher education, from academia into higher education, but someone's asking sort of a different flavor of it. So they're asking, what about the switch from corporate to higher education or academia? They're really at a loss, and this would be, they would appreciate any insights. Would any of our panelists like to start this off?
One thing I'll say real quick is I obviously am still in corporate, so I haven't jumped back to academia, but not all corporates made the same. Like I've worked at some of the bigger ones in Canada, like 12,000 folks, Shopify. That got kind of nasty after a while, and the culture there was pretty bad. I love the culture of the corporate company I work at. 1,000 people, globally distributed, and we're based in Italy. So there's definitely an element of like, yeah, if you want to go back to academia, that's one thing, but I've seen some terrible corporate environments and I've seen some wonderful ones. So perhaps there's a different corporate out there, but obviously if somebody's got some advice on back into academia, I don't.
Mm-hmm. Very good point. I mean, what it really comes down to, what I'm here, is also workplace culture. What is the workplace culture like, right? So it doesn't matter if you're in academia or corporate. I always try to look at what is their strategic plan? What do they say they stand for? Because I always like to leverage that as well when I see problems arising, right? So kind of being able to see like, okay, where do their values lie, right? And also look at the incentives for where you're going to work and aligning that right back with, again, what is my skill set? How do I fit in with this? I think sometimes we're like, yeah, I just need to get that job, especially when, we're probably in our first years of graduation. We're hungry and we're passionate. And I think that it's a great place to start, is having that need and that hunger, but then also being able to position yourself as an asset to wherever you're working, and then taking a look at the culture of where you want to be and making sure that sort of aligns with, whether, the values, the mission, and again, the overarching sort of culture of the organization, whether that's in higher education or a corporate setting. Um, Thank you so much for that. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next question that we have here. We have quite a few. This question is from Chantel. She's saying, hello, all. Just wondering if it's possible as an OISE alumni to connect with other mentors. I just heard about the mentorship program from a friend. And so they were just wondering about that. Not sure if Natalie might be able to answer that as well, but wondering if any of you are familiar with the OISE Alumni Program that connects students to mentors.
So I've been a mentor in the program for a couple years. Unfortunately, I can't commit it to it every year, otherwise I would, but I love it. Even as a mentor, I'm learning from the mentee. So what OISE will do, they'll try to match you with someone that's like in a similar program as that you've graduated from, so that you can talk about the program or job opportunities or network. It's a really nice experience, and OISE does have events where you can connect with the mentors and mentees can connect. It's sign up for it. That's what I'll say. And I'm sure Natalie will give you like the fine details.
Excellent. Thank you so, so much. Natalie, if you do have any details you can include in the chat for us, we would truly appreciate it. Thanks so much. Okay, I do see another question that was asked a bit earlier that I kind of kept note of, and it was just around, and I think I saw a couple answers, but there may be some other perspectives to add, and I know that I've had some experiences as well. So the question is just around finding jobs on LinkedIn and what experiences the panelists have had. Have you reached out to a job recruiter on LinkedIn or have had any reach out to you, and what was your experience?
I can start at this one. I'll say always luck. Like, I think that's actually the biggest thing. As somebody who actually receives quite a few messages from folks who are interested in transitioning or learning how, there's a difference in the messages I receive that have a sense of urgency behind it because somebody's scrambling for a job or,
Hmm.
like tough times. And there's a difference between the messages I get from folks who are just curious that just say, hey, you work in whatever I work in at the time. Um, no clue how you did it. Would love to just grab 30 minutes to learn more about your story. And that's that. I love those second ones because it doesn't feel like, the next thing they're going to ask is very transactional. Like, can you refer me for a job next? Which sometimes I will do if it makes sense and it's a good fit. But at the same time, I much rather a conversation about the experience I've had so far as opposed to just
Hmm.
um, an outreach for the sake of getting a referral for the job. You remember that the folks you're reaching out to probably get a lot of those. And so
Hmm.
just organic curiosity and just an interest goes a long way. And then you help to build your network out. So obviously, if you're in a rush, that's one thing. But if you're not, now is still a good time to build your network.
Hmm. Hmm. Kind
I
of reminds me of what Aman said earlier, and I'll go to you next and then to Jamie, just around being authentic. So even in the communication with individuals you're reaching out to, make sure you're being authentic. Yes, we want to show that we are desiring something, but we don't want to be desperate, right? And just having that difference, because remember, you are also an asset to whatever organization you are hoping to interact with, right? So, bringing that authenticity, I think, is really key. Aman, I'll go to you next.
And so there's just 2 points that I want to reach out. As someone who works in a business school and literally talks to students about networking and pieces like that. The one tangible piece. So the first thing that I'm going to tell everybody here is that if you're not sure about what your next role is or what you're kind of wanting to jump into, like Vin said, find an area that you're kind of interested and look at their job board on LinkedIn. Take a look at all the different jobs that are there. Find how your experience or lack of experience may line up with that job. And then during the time you're in your job or whatever, try finding ways to incorporate pieces of those experiences into the job that you're doing. So what I tell my coordinators is, what is the job you want 2 years out from now? Find me that job posting, give it to me. I can try and find and figure out ways to engage, like provide those opportunities for you. If you don't know where you're going, you don't want to be 2 years out from 2 years, right? You're doing your work, everything's great, and then all of a sudden you want to switch. You you want to switch over to tech, and then you recognize that these are all my gaps. Do it now.
Mhm.
Find those job postings, talk to those individuals to figure out where your piece might be, not there. And the second part is the idea of networking. Another tangible kind of tip that you may want to do is reach out to individuals out there. Keep a note of what you've talked about. Make it personal, right? And sometimes we're so busy, we forget about so many different things. it may not be a bad idea to write it down. Like, oh, I met with Amin. Amin's got a dog. Amin lives in Toronto. Amin's been at Rotman for this time, blah, blah, blah. And if or when you come across an article or something happens, pull up that Word document, see where that person is, and then just shoot them an email again, right? And allow
Mhm.
that connection to flourish again. And I don't need you to talk to me, every week or every 2 months. Like if you send me a message 1 month to talk about stuff and we really hit it off, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now, you message me again and just being like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
in, remember, I'm still going to think about, hey, let's meet up again. Let's see how I can help you, right? And that's where those pieces really work. So if you want something to kind of take out, look for those jobs and kind of reach out, but also keep a track of who you're reaching out to so you're not just, you know, shooting in the dark all the
That
Very,
note-taking
very
tip is
great
so
pieces
good.
around that. Yeah.
Yeah, I take
Mhm.
notes. Absolutely take notes. Ask people how their kids are if they mention they have
Mhm.
kids. Like just take the notes.
And to me, it just makes me think about being intentional, around networking on LinkedIn. The last three job opportunities I had and two consulting opportunities I had came directly through LinkedIn. And that was just being intentional about who I was adding, to my network. Reach out to them, send them a thank you so much for adding me. I would love the opportunity to see if there's an opportunity for synergy or collaboration in the future. As simple as that is, that could lead you to your next open door, right? To me, I almost find, and again, every industry is different, but I've had probably just as much success with LinkedIn or more than Indeed, right? And that's just really about, again, knowing the who's who and, finding individuals who are in leaders of school of thought that you want to be in. And again, being intentional with how you're, integrating your learning experiences and highlighting that on LinkedIn. If you've done something cool more recently, if you had a talk that you're a part of, a workshop that you're a part of, even if it was in your area of work where you're working, highlight that on your LinkedIn profile. Those are some of the things that sometimes create traction. And so when you're having individuals who are headhunters or who are working in consulting firms who are looking to hire on behalf of employers, your LinkedIn profile is going to be able to come up, and you can use that and put that on on your resume in the future. So just little tidbits to keep in mind. I'm just going to keep the conversation moving because we do have quite a few questions to get through. I'm going to start with you, Jamie, because I know that you're working in teachers as a teacher. This question is, why does one have to go to teachers college after getting their bachelor's of ed?
Okay, so I'm not sure I understand that because Teachers College does give you your bachelor's of ed. So would they be able to clarify? Because that's what Teachers
If
College is.
okay.
You do get your bachelor's of ed, at least in Ontario. I'm not sure about other places.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Good for them
Yeah.
to maybe clarify. Maybe they're
Yeah.
not sure. If the individual wants to write a little bit more in the chat, hopefully we can get to that. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah,
Um,
I can answer if I have a little bit more details.
Perfect. The next question is, what part of OISE's degree, in your respective fields, did you find most valuable to the role in which you're currently occupying?
Jemmelia,
Yes.
sorry. It looks like it there's more detail in the chat. So can I just go back to answer that question, the former question, real quick?
Yeah, we'll have you answer that formal question. I'll come back to this one. Go ahead.
Okay, so to be a teacher in Ontario, you have to be at a publicly funded school. I'll say that. You have to be OCT certified. When you go to teachers college, you do get a bachelor's of education, and what it also comes with is you apply for OCT certification. So granted, you've fulfilled everything in your bachelor of ed, you will get that OCT certificate. Private schools have different requirements. Not all private schools require you to be OCT certified. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, okay.
And
And
then,
actually, just to piggyback off of that, because there's a very similar question around the area of teachers. This question says, this is an in-depth question, and I also struggle for decades. I've been struggling for decades of work experience in secondary schools and private to post-secondary. Appreciating any advice any strategic advice? So it sounds like they're trying to say they want to switch from working in secondary schools to private and the post-secondary sector. Any advice from any of our panelists in
I
that
can answer
regard?
that one as well, a little bit. So if they're wanting to switch from publicly funded secondary to private secondary, I'm not sure how that works exactly. I would say LinkedIn is great to look for jobs in that area. But what was the second part of it? Sorry, I forgot now. It was
They're
switching
just
to
wondering how to switch from the secondary school sector to maybe post-secondary school to
post-secondary.
private sector.
So post-secondary, the private sector, I'm gonna be honest with you, I've applied to a few things there surrounding EC, and I haven't got any luck there, but it's not to say that people won't. Um, I will keep trying. But in terms of um, post-secondary, like a university or college, they are they do typically look for more and more people with PhDs or like doctorates in those areas. But sometimes, like in my situation, I have a master's of ed, and I did happen to get an opportunity to teach a job in the faculty of ed at Niagara University. But again, I'll be honest with you, I got that through LinkedIn because I posted the workshops that I do for my school board and my teachers union around culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. So like I'm just saying it's kind of you have to be consistent and just keep looking, but also sell yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the age where social media, even professionally speaking, is very helpful in finding work. So get out there, share what you're doing, reach out to people, as the gentleman and Jemmelia on our panel have said. Um, that's the best advice I can give you at this point.
Yeah, yeah. And I know sometimes we don't always want to do things for free, but I'll share a really quick story. I spoke at a conference pro bono, but I really used that to leverage the opportunity to network. And that led to two open doors to lecture with two other colleges in the province. So network, being able to offer your services, let people know where your areas of strengths are very key, sort of to what Jamie's point is. And I love how she's found that niche. And now that's, I'm sure, a bread and butter for her to continue to navigate into spaces and for people to call on her. I'm going to go to another question that we have here. It says, any advice on preparing yourself for opportunities available and making your own path transitioning into different sectors, whether finding cold LinkedIn messages, finding cold LinkedIn messages are only getting so far. Any advice, Vince, Amon, or Jamie? Go ahead,
Something
Vince.
yeah, something I'll throw out here. A lot of the panelists so far have talked about the idea of excelling yourself. I'll take that a step further and say before you can do that, you really got to know your story. I've met so many people who have done tons of great things, but can't articulate it in 5 minutes or fewer. Try it in 2 minutes. One of the best leadership programs I did had an exercise. It's a 10-week program. At the start of the program, we just introed ourselves to everyone. And every week we introed ourselves to a group of like three others in breakout rooms. And it's a really good exercise to force you to think strategically about you've only got 2 minutes. What do you say about your last 10 years of experience, 20 years of experience? What you choose to focus on and what you choose to omit is going to vary depending on who you're speaking to and what you want to get across. But I think that exercise of like practicing your intro in 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever you think is appropriate is a really productive one because you can't sell yourself if you don't know your story. And we're all from OISE, so we understand the value of reflection. So reflect and then turn that
Mhm.
into a good story that means something to somebody.
And what
I
that
love that.
story is, and what Vince talked about, is what's your brand, right? What is the brand that you are trying to sell at the end of the day? And I'm not trying to be very corporate and stuff like that, but if you don't know what your brand is and you don't know how to share it, and you're not utilizing the tools to get yourself out there, to get eyeballs on you, then you're not going to be seen, right? And these speaking opportunities and these workshops and these things do not come from just you doing your job in terms of just linear, right? It comes from going out to events. It comes from speaking at or like coming out to some of these spaces. It comes from sharing your story on LinkedIn, on social media, showing people what you are doing, and allowing your brand to speak for itself. So take the opportunity and the time, and we teach this to our students as well. You're in an elevator. What's your 30-second pitch, right? when that the best question is during interview, tell me a little bit about yourself. If you cannot tell me a little bit about yourself in that minute to 2 minutes about what it is that interests you about this job, who you are, what, wants me to be like, yes, I want to learn more about you, then you got to spend the time to know that. Because then once you go to these networking opportunities and someone goes, hey, Jamie, tell me a little bit about yourself, you know exactly what you're going to say. And then that conversation goes boom. It's like, oh, you know what? Let me introduce you to someone else I know, right? You are hitting some of those pieces. So again, it's very, very important. We live in a world now where it's not just what you do, it's how you can share what you do very well.
Mhm. Very, very true. So it sounds like we really need to have a clear elevator pitch. I've heard it said this way. If you can't say it in a language that a sixth grader can understand, it's far too complicated. Make your pitch very clear so that the individual wants to know more. It doesn't have to be, too long. Just a mouthful to even to narrowing it down to two sentences allows you to have your foot in the door for them to ask you more questions. So we're going to finish off on one last question. I'm going to ask you just to keep it to a minute or less. The question is another question around finding and getting opportunities that are not directly work related, but support professional development, such as speaking engagements or workshops, etc. How do you get into that? How did you get into that?
Super short answer, do something worth talking about and figure out who wants to hear about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And don't be afraid. I never in a million years did my MEd, went to teachers college and thought, I'm gonna do some public speaking around education. I never thought about that. So I think the other piece is keep following what's interesting to you. And yes, it might seem nervous. Do it once and then decide if you like it or not, and just keep moving with it. That's what I would say.
Excellent.
Um, get involved. The way that I got in, true story, the way I got involved with this speaking engagement was I decided to be a part of the OISE alumni, you know, group. And that was just because I wanted to get involved and understand. And all these opportunities are out there in your email. Hey, join us for our committee. Come out and be a part of this committee. And that all of those things are there. We just tend to
Mm-hmm.
ignore them because we think it's not worth our time. It is worth your time. Go out there, find committees that you want to be a part of, find boards you want to be a part of, apply. There are people who are begging for people to be a part of those groups and committees and boards. And so it's there. You just have to be willing to put that time in. So yeah, go out there and join those committees, those boards, those working groups, stuff like that.
Excellent. And now maybe we'll just close with this. Also create your own lane. I went and created a workshop, put it online, made it free for the first time. 90 people attended. I then charged the second time around. And from there became a handful of opportunities for me to speak at organizations. Because at the end, I said, if you'd like to know more, I just gave them enough to wet their feet and said, if you'd like to, collaborate on opportunities for me to speak at your organization, here are my contact details. So again, you can network, as Aman said, putting yourself out there, being able to, again, sell yourself, knowing your lane. I think these are really great pieces of advice. And I wanted to say thank you so much to our panels for joining us today. I think your insights were very valuable, and I hope it helped those who are with us. I see a few people asking if you can include your contact details in the chat. So if you have your LinkedIn, if you can include your bio, if you feel comfortable with sharing your email, please do so in the chat. I think there's a few people who are hoping to get in contact with you. So again, thank you so much, Jamie, Aman, and Vince. We also want to thank Natalie, who is a staff at OISE, for putting today's workshop together, as well as Neil, our IT specialist, for keeping us in check. Again, thank you for joining us, everybody. I hope that this has been insightful and helpful. And again, take avail to the LinkedIn and bios and the contact information that will be posted into the chat, and hope to see you all again soon.
Have a great night, everyone. Nice chatting with you.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.